Welcome to the Utah Board of Water Resources board meeting today. Thank you for coming. I'm Mike Davis. I'm the chair of the board and represent the Provo district. We'll introduce the rest of the board.
I'm Dana Van Horn. I represent the Upper Colorado district.
I'm Blaine Ibsen. I represent the Sevier River district.
William Merkley. I represent the Green River district.
Brian Steed, Great Salt Lake.
Thank you.
Okay, and then I'm Candace Hosniger, director at the Division of Water Resources, and with us today on our team is Joel Williams, Shalane DiBernardi, Marisa Egbert, I believe Tom Cox is online, Ani Baynard, Ben Merritt, Ethan Stayner, Bradley Caldwell, Scott McGettigan, Becca Free, Isabel Melmer, Jessica Chen, our AG Sarah Schechter's with us, also a guest Edward Mueller from the Deputy Water Agent, and Shannon is taking our minutes. And as always, we're very grateful for our AV team, Carmen McDonald and Seth Majors, who make all of this possible.
Thank you, Director. Well, the first item on our meeting is approval of the minutes. And are there any questions or edits needed on the minutes from the board? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to accept and approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Thank you for that. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. And the next item, how did you get up to the top of the agenda, Jordan? You don't have to wait through the whole meeting. But we have the NRCS snow report. We have Jordan Clayton here with us. We're always excited to see him because it makes us feel optimistic about weather for some reason, at least me.
I hope I can live up to that. We'll see. Well, good afternoon, and thank you for including me in the agenda, members of the board. Again, my name is Jordan Clayton, the supervisor of the Utah Snow Survey. I wanted to do something a little different today, with your permission, a little bit more time to jump into a little bit more detail about our forecasting. Look back to last year and also look forward to what we've forecasted as of May 1st. And we'll also talk quite extensively about southern Utah and some of the conditions that we're seeing, and then dive into some of the normal things that we give in these updates. So with that in mind, just quickly looking back at last year's forecasts, I wanted to talk about, again, for anyone in the room that's not familiar with our forecasting, what these numbers mean. We talk a lot about the middle of the road forecast. That's the 50th exceedance probability forecast, but we also want to remember that these are meant to be a probabilistic range. Anything from the low forecast, which you'd have a 90% chance of exceeding, that's our 10, if you will, or the 90 forecast, if you will. It's a 90% chance you're not going to get there, or a 10% chance you will, depending on what your optimism level is. So again, you can approach numbers that way as we go through. And again, bearing in mind, if we look back at sort of the history of forecasting on the Weber at Oakley, that you're again dealing with a probabilistic range. These kayak plots show where the forecasts were through time for that particular forecast site. And where they actually landed is that blue dot. And so sometimes it's in the middle of that distribution, which would be the most probable outcome. But of course, at times you can be outside that range. There is always a 20% chance, based on these probabilities, that you'd be outside that those bounds. A little bit of discussion of what makes the forecast more or less accurate. Generally, the NRCS forecasts are about 75 to 80% accurate, in some cases better, in some cases worse. And the number one error, the source of uncertainty in these forecasts is anomalously low or high precipitation after the forecast date. There's nothing we can do about that. I'll show a slide in just a minute talking about how far we can look ahead and have any kind of confidence in precipitation data. But that's really the number one thing that causes the forecast to struggle. Other things have to do with errors in the data themselves. If you have too much regulation or things that haven't been accounted for in terms of diversions, obviously that's going to matter. Some sites just don't have a good relationship between the upstream headwater snowpack and downstream downstream flow. We are dealing with non-stationarity in some sites, And something that I've really been stressing in a lot of our reports is the unusual groundwater or soil moisture conditions that can really impact what we get from the snowpack to the runoff. This is what I was mentioning. This is a graph showing how far into the future we can reasonably expect to have confidence in a weather forecast. Pretty good for about 3 days, okay maybe for a week, a little better than nothing after about 15 days. So when we talk about future weather, I really like to stress the 6 to 10 day or 8 to 14 day forecast at the most, and I'll show those at the end. How are we working to improve our forecasting? Obviously, we're working on model developments. I've talked about it in other talks, so I won't really stress that here. But we do have an updated forecast model that's a machine learning model that is more flexible and has some neat whistles that we can blow. We have a longer period of record at our existing sites. That always helps to develop these correlations. We're adding new sites, less so this year, but in general, that's true. We're working on bringing in these other parameters like soil moisture, et cetera, into our modeling. So if we look back at what was going on last year, this is the range of forecasts that we had, where the blue dots on the map were forecasts that were essentially above normal for those locations. These are the forecast points across the state of Utah. Then the yellow into orange and red colors were forecasts that were predicted to be below normal at those locations. And you can see the statewide snowpack condition. I didn't put all the details here, but I showed the statewide snow water equivalent graph at the top here. And this a nice picture of Gun Lake Reservoir and its spillway, what was going on last year. This is what we actually got in terms of our accuracy. Red is where we got less than what we actually predicted. Blue, we got more than what we actually predicted. And green, we did pretty well. And in general, we see that there was pretty good overlap in some areas, and I'll talk about where we did well in just a minute. In other locations, there was some overprediction, and we think that is attributable to some below normal precipitation that we got in April. In some areas, we also saw some antecedent moisture in soils impact our forecasting, and there's some other things that it's hard to account for. If we look, for example, at the April precipitation data from PRISM, you drape that on top of the forecast and where we did well versus where we didn't. It's not a perfect match, but in southeastern Utah, there's a little bit of an overlap there. So this is not a guessing game, but obviously we have these sources of error that cause this to be a challenge. Some forecast areas were exceptionally accurate last year. The Weber Ogden was one of those. You can see for the different forecast points, which are the rows on this graph, the middle, the thicker slice, if you will, that thicker line, that's for the top one, 126, you can see how close that is to the middle of the distribution. Others are even closer to the middle, such as the Weber River near Colville, the third one down. So again, the Weber was an area where we did particularly well in terms of nailing that middle of that range, and that's where the observation landed. Another one that was, I think, just sheer luck was the Great Salt Lake and its rise itself. We projected a peak 24 stage of 4195.2, and we got within 0.1 of that. We don't expect to be that accurate every year. Again, that was just something that I think was a little bit of luck. So how did the forecast look this year? Again, we're going to be focusing on May 1 forecast that were just updated about a week ago. A little bit of this is challenging. I thought this was kind of a fun little note about prediction in general. But moving on to the forecast numbers. The streamflow forecasts for April through July flow are increasingly negative compared to where they were a month ago. This is showing from a basin perspective. I'll show the individual forecast points in just a minute. But from a basin perspective, what the percent normal runoff is predicted to be, again, from the beginning of April through the end of July. And these are colored by anything below 50% of normal, in this case, percent of average, marked as red, and you can see the rest of the legend on the left side. How does this compare to where we were a month ago? You can see April on the left side and the May 1st forecast on the right side. It's hard to do the math back and forth. We don't have a way to display this on the map, so I just did the math for you here. So you can see the change in the percentages from one basin to the next based on, again, that month-to-month difference. Most of that had to do with how poor precipitation was over the course of April, which is shown now on the left side here. This is the precipitation anomaly for the month of April. The one place where there was above normal precipitation in the state was the Escalante Perea, and you can see that's actually one place where there's +3 in terms of the change in the forecast, so that lines up. These are now the individual forecast points around the state. I'm showing, again, the 50th exceedance probability. I'll talk about a couple of the other probability forecasts in just a minute. But again, here we're expressing this as percent of average. We've got a couple green dots on the map, so that's positive for the Provo River. That's where those are. Most of the smallest numbers in terms of percent of normal runoff are for small creeks and streams, and I've listed those here, West Canyon Creek. I won't go through all of them. You can read them on the slide. There are a couple exceptions to that where we have some red dots on the Virgin and Sevier in particular. If we express these as a percentile, we see the same basic pattern, although there's a little bit more green around the center of the state. And essentially what that's saying is we're within the range of normal observations, even though we're below normal. We're essentially within the range of what we've seen in the middle of the distribution anyway for much of the center of the state, and when we get increasingly southward in the state, we get more and more extreme in terms of what we're seeing this year relative to the past. Notice that nearly all the southern Utah predictions are expected to be in that bottom 15% of our observations. If we now look at the 30th exceedance probability forecast, which I've shown here, we're looking at essentially what would be an optimistic future. We only have essentially a 30% chance of making this forecast point. And yet, when we look at the southwestern portion of the state, we're still looking at potentially near record minimums. So I put this in this presentation to stress that even if we're being optimistic, the situation in southern Utah is pretty extreme. Now, I also wanted to show off a couple of new items that we have in terms of advances on our webpage and new products that we wanted to advertise. So if we focus just for a second on the Weber River near Oakley, this is looking backwards a month. This is the April 1st forecast that's shown on the top row. We changed to May. You can see how that changes in the distribution. But instead of looking at it slide by slide like that, what we now have available are these evolution plots, which are a really nice advancement. They're really similar to what the CBRFC has been doing for a long time, but we tried to essentially put together our own version of that. We're going to have this available on our webpage by next forecast season, where you can click on any one of our forecast points and you'll see these evolution plots, which will be, I think, really helpful. I've graphed this against the average line, which is that 30-year average green line, so you can see where the distribution falls over time relative to that average. And of course, right now, the Weber River near Oakley, the most recent one, the May 1st one, showing all the forecast distribution below that average point. Now let's talk a little bit more about southern Utah. I'm going to be kind of down here for a second. I apologize. This is just the data. I want to talk specifically about some forecast points that I've identified here, starting in the southeast, South Creek near Monticello, 7% of average runoff. You can see the others, Mammoth Creek near Hatch, all the rest I'm going to mention around 25% or more or less. Santa Clara River near Pine Valley, about 25% of normal runoff, and the Virgin itself near Hurricane, about 24%. I'm going to be listing several things about southern Utah that are concerning. They're going to be all labeled at the top. So the exceptionally poor runoff potential is one of the things that really jumps out. You can see the forecast evolution for the Virgin River near Virgin here. It's been concerning for a while. At this point, using this distribution, we can see the minimum line there, which is that red line. We have about a 30% chance of breaking that record in terms of runoff at the Virgin near Virgin. We also, as we do in all of our reports, have these surface water supply indexes where we combine how much water we've got in our reservoirs with the amount that we're forecasting to get an overall volume, which we can then compare with previous years to get a sense for, hey, how much surface water are we going to have? How does it compare to previous years? The red lines here are the ones that are concerning. They're below the 25th percentile. And the Virgin, Sevier, and Moab regions, in addition to a few others actually on the list, jump out. Continuing with stream flow, this is now data from the CBRFC. We don't do peak flow forecasting, but they do. And so this is looking at how high the river might actually get at any given time. We have the potential to break peak flow records in terms of the minimum peak flows that we've seen on a couple streams in southern Utah in particular. East Fork of the Virgin has a 55-year period of record. We might get a new record this year. Same thing for Coal Creek near Cedar, which is a 95-year period of record, which also looks like it might go this year. This is current data from the U.S. Geological Survey, looking at the current stream flows as of a couple days ago. I looked again at this map this morning, and Canal Creek is no longer breaking the record for its historic low flow, but it's essentially still in the bottom 10th percentile, as is much of southern Utah. Obviously, the snowpack's been a major part of this. This is showing as of a couple days ago what things normally look like on May 12th. These are the normals at our snowtell sites relative to the bottom graph, which is this year's SWE values. Most of the southern half of the state's melted out. This is looking at soil moisture. We're at southeastern Utah in the top graph there. You can see the current condition with the black line below the range of observations. You can see southwestern Utah in the bottom left has gotten back into the range of observations. It was breaking records for a while, but it's still in the bottom 10th percentile. One of the areas in southern Utah that's benefited from recent precipitation has been the Escalante Paria. You can see how that one has rebounded in the bottom right. So a little bit of positive news. And then, of course, the reservoirs themselves. This is jumping from area to area, which you can see are labeled Southwest Utah, Southeast Utah, Beaver, and Upper Sevier. There's still a pretty nice amount of reservoir supply, but if we look at last year in the purple relative to this year in the green, this is definitely a sizable depletion relative to other areas of the state. And then, of course, we're no stranger to the drought monitor. You can see the slice of D3 drought in the southwest corner of the state. So just trying to paint a full holistic picture of what the conditions are looking like from our data perspective. A couple comments on the Great Salt Lake and our updated forecast. As of May 1st, the lake was at 4193.4. At this point, we're forecasting the lake to get up to about 4193.7, which is a drop of about 1/3 of a foot from our last month's forecast. So not quite as good as we had hoped, but we're still in that almost 4194 range. And then just a couple quick comments about the water year as a whole. You can see this year's snowpack statewide was the black line. The one just above the black line is the orange line. That's last year. Of course, 2023 really pushes the graph upwards. And then 2022 and 2021 are below this year. Of course, we're kind of in that middle range this year. Wasn't as good as we had hoped, but not as bad as those 2022 and 2021 years. We peaked on March 23rd, which was about 10 days early. Of course, the distribution of snow right now reflects the early melt that we've had. I would caution us to be careful of percent normal numbers as we get this far into the distribution. But anyway, this is the distribution of SWE right now. Precipitation did benefit from the storms yesterday. We'll have an updated number today and tomorrow as well. Instead of 92% of normal, it's 93% of normal, so we're up a percentage. I didn't update the graph, but I basically just told you what the difference is. We're hoping to get back to that green line if we can. And then soil moisture is also seeing a little bit of a blip from yesterday, but it's still in that bottom 10th to 30th percentile statewide. One of the things that I'm seeing in this graph that's concerning, this is again statewide soil moisture, is the recession. The dry down of soil moisture is very early, which could potentially lead to a longer than normal dry period during the summer. Of course, there's fire risk implications for that. Statewide reservoirs are at 83% of capacity. You can see the growing brown line on the left side there shows 2025. You can see how that compares to previous years, which are labeled at the bottom. Statewide, we're still in excellent shape. When we compare to other states, we're second only to Oregon. You can see the different states across the west. Green is normal, and you can see where the states are relative to normal. Again, Utah is second only to Oregon in terms of how much water it's holding on to right now, so that's very positive. Our stream flows are hurting statewide, not just in southern Utah. We can see we've broken the barrier down into the bottom 10th percentile for our 7-day duration runoff. This is again USGS data. And then quickly, the 6 to 10 day looks pretty positive as of a couple days ago for precipitation. Go out a little further, it's starting to look a little bit dry. It's been really wet this week. Obviously, we're looking at some nice precipitation over the next week or so we'll take it and we'll hope for more to come. That's all I have.
Any questions?
When we
Sure.
go out longer than the last slide, what are you seeing? And I know a prediction is hard, but I'm curious on what the longer term predictions are.
Yeah, I have not looked beyond the 8 to 14 day based on what I
Okay.
expressed before.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Any other questions? Yes.
Can I ask one more? In terms of prediction versus reality, from the from the precipitation numbers we were seeing at the beginning and really through March of this year, we would have expected higher runoff. Is that just soil moisture that's the difference?
In some areas, I do believe it is soil moisture. We really underperformed in January, and then we underperformed again in April. But you're right, the forecasts have been really down from relative to the SWE numbers. We had a dry and warm fall as well, so the forecasts are really driven by, as we've talked about, the combination of both precip and SWE. I think it's all those things that are combining into that. I know the CBRFC is modeling really dry soils in their predictions as well, and ours line up pretty well with theirs. So that's definitely part of it. Yeah.
Any other questions? Jordan, thank you so much for your presentation.
Yep. Thank you.
I neglected to mention that we did not have any online public comment for today's meeting. So we'll proceed now with that. We'll go to the feasibility reports, starting with RE 495.
The presentation. You want me to close this one? No, sorry. Okay. Yes, Co-op Farm Irrigation Company, RE 495. This one would be coming from the revolving construction fund. The total project cost for Co-op Farm is about $1,994,000, and so looking at the existing system, and this is 4 miles east of Huntsville in Weber County. So looking at the existing system here, purple shows the proposed co-op pipeline, and they have the diversion off of the South Fork of the Ogden River there, and then they connect downstream of them is Huntsville, goes into the conveyance system for Huntsville South Bench, which is Brad's project that he'll be talking about next. And so just some background on the applicant for co-op. They supply irrigation water to 41 agricultural shareholders covering about 447 acres and then 12 secondary connections. All of the agricultural acres are sprinkle irrigated, and they are supplied by water right off of the South Fork of the Ogden River, and then there's some that they get from Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, which comes through that same diversion off of the South Fork. The existing system has aging concrete pipes, earthen canals, and aging concrete lined canals that all contribute to kind of decreased conveyance efficiency because of kind of the leaks and the evaporation. The existing diversion structure diverts water for both Co-op and Huntsville South Bench. And as I said, Huntsville South Bench Canal Company is downstream of them. And that's kind of old and deteriorating as well. Between the diversion structure and the point where the two systems split into their own infrastructure is approximately 14,000 feet of existing conveyance system that needs to be replaced. So this is kind of, even though we're presenting it as two projects, it's kind of a joint project, and kind of how that came about is Co-op and Huntsville South Bench were jointly awarded a water and energy efficiency grant, which I believe comes from the Bureau of, it is, the Bureau of Reclamation, and that joint grant, and because they're tied to the same system, kind of tied these projects together. And so I'm kind of presenting on what Co-op's responsibility is, and then Brad will present on what Huntsville South Bench is. Then I have some pictures of the existing system. That's kind of off of their, and I hope I labeled this right, off of their just off of the diversion structure into kind of unlined canal, and that's a continuation of that. And then that's kind of where it diverts. They have some aging concrete pipeline, and that's where it diverts underground before it daylights again. And then this is downstream, pretty close to where they connect to Huntsville South Bench. That's an old flume. That's kind of one of the ways that they measure flow. But one of the benefits of this project is it'll be metered, so they'll have a lot better way to measure that. And so, just going back to the map for now. And so the proposed project, to get into that, is to replace the shared conveyance system with about 14,000 feet of 20-inch and 24-inch HDPE pipe. An additional 4,250 feet of the applicant's system will be replaced with 6-inch HDPE pipe. This will allow the applicant's system to be fully pressurized, and then there will be a completely new diversion structure installed. There will be, I believe it's 21 turnouts, and then some service connections will be upgraded and metered. And the costs of the new diversion structure and the shared conveyance system will be split between Co-op and Huntsville South Bench. Co-op will pay 70% of the shared costs, and Huntsville South Bench will pay 30% of the shared costs. And then there's also additional costs that they're each responsible for. But I kind of touched on some of the benefits, but just this will eliminate the risk of having open canal in their residential area. The water losses will be virtually eliminated, and just aging infrastructure, the aging diversion structure, that'll have a new screening and filtration system that'll do a really good job of keeping out sediment and organic material before it gets into the pressurized system. And another thing that it will do is reduce energy usage and cost. Right now, a lot of the users just pump straight from the canal, and so now that it'll be gravity fed and pressurized, and so they won't have the same pumping costs anymore. Looking at the cost estimate, in the report that the board has, table 1 shows the cost that Co-op is responsible for, and that totals $524,000. Table 2 shows the shared costs of that. Co-op is responsible for 70%. That 70% comes out to just over $1,262,000. Combining those two with design and construction engineering, legal and admin, permits and fees, the total cost for Co-op is $1,994,000. And then that page. And so that'll take us to the cost sharing. I talked a little bit about that WE grant. They also are getting some UDAF grants, and so the board's cost share is only 17.5%, and it comes out to $348,000. So yeah, I'll get into the recommendation. The staff recommends the board authorize 17.5% of the project cost up to $348,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $23,200. And that is staff's report. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ethan. We also have with us representing the applicant Ed Rich, President Brian Dieter from JUB. Do you want to come up and present anything?
Bill White here.
Is Bill White in attendance? Invite you up. Anything you'd like to add to the presentation before we start?
No, the only thing I didn't pick up on is right now, just the co-op part of the system is losing 25% of our water, which has been going on for a long, long time. So this is important that we basically be zero loss, and that we our payment, we've scheduled our payments from our members so we can handle the repayment without any undue big problems. It's just, it should be no problem. So that's about all I have. We're happy to have you interested in helping us.
Okay, great. So, board, are there any questions for either of the presenters? All right, well, seeing none, then I would ask for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the board authorize 17.5% of the project cost up to $348,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $23,200.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Board Member Merkley. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item to consider is RE 496, Huntsville South Bench Canal Company. And Brad is presenting on this.
Mr. Chair and the board, good afternoon. So the Huntsville South Bench Company, in partnership with Co-op Farm Irrigation Company, like Ethan said, was jointly awarded a water and energy efficiency grant, known as WEG, of about 1.1 million, and of which that the 562,000 about was awarded to Huntsville South Bench, and then they also have an awarded $500,000 UDEF grant, and then they also have the 408,000 about pending UDEF grant, and that will be awarded in June of 2025. So the proposed project is pressurizing an aging irrigation system. The project includes replacing approximately 18,400 feet of deteriorated concrete lined canal and existing pipeline with HDPE pipe, of which 2,500 feet is associated with the applicant, as well as constructing a new diversion structure. These improvements will enhance water efficiency, lower operational costs by about $5,000 yearly, and extend service to 5 previously unserviced acres. And showing here on the map, this is where the pipeline will be built, and a big portion of that in the middle is already piped, so they will just be finishing off about the start where that red dot is, red square, and then the end of the canal. And then so this is where I believe this is where the junction happens between Co-op and Huntsville South Bench, and they'll be piping that. And then this is the end of the existing pipeline where they will be piping the deteriorating canal. And then I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little clean out box there that they'll be removing and replacing it with pipe. So the staff recommends the board authorize 16.1% of the project cost up to $320,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $21,350.
Thank you, Brad. We also, I believe the applicant is represented by Greg Graves and Brian Dieter. If you want to come up and please give us a report. You can sit at the table or right there, wherever you want.
We're pleased to be able to do this joint venture with Co-op. Originally, were going to have to make some repairs on our ditch, the remaining part that wasn't piped and remained just a gravity flow. And about the time that we were going to do that, Co-op decided to pressurize. It gave us a perfect chance, and probably the only chance that we'll ever have to pressurize our section. And in as much as we're tied together with having to pay for part of their improvements anyway, whether we do anything or not, we felt this was the great time for us to do this. We're really appreciative of your interest and willingness to help us make this thing happen. We've been wanting this for a long time, and it will really make a difference for us.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. Board, are there any questions either for Brad or for Mr. Graves? Yes,
I have
Councilmember Steve.
one question. It says there'll be 5 additional acres that are irrigated. And is that with the saved water that comes from this?
It is.
And is there an intent to put that into? I mean, are you going to start irrigating in those 5 acres that you haven't done previously?
Those 5 acres haven't been,
Yeah.
but they can be
And
once we do this, because it's pressurized, and it'll be agricultural land.
and is it your intent to irrigate that? I mean, those 5 acres?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Chair would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the board authorize 16.1% of the project cost up to $320,000, and that the project be purchased at 0% interest over 15 years, with annual payments of approximately $21,350.
And I'll second it.
We have a motion. We have a second by Councilmember Van Horn. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Okay, for this next one, for the I'm losing my papers. For the Powder Mountain Water and Sewer, if Roy Watts, Carrie Zenger, and Greg Siegmiller, and James Strong. If you're here, come on up. Thank you for being here. Glad to have you. Ani, if you would like to present to us. And
So good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. The proposed project is located 4 miles east of Eden in Weber County. The Powder Mountain Water and Sewer Improvement District provides water year-round to about 150 connections. The district has 4 water sources: Bloomington Well, Hidden Lake Well, Cobab Well, and Pitzel Springs number 3. The system also has 2 pressure zones, an upper and a lower. Powder Mountain Water and Sewer has approximately 4 miles of pipeline and 4 storage tanks, totaling 590,000 gallons. The Hidden Lake tanks are located at the top of the system at a higher elevation than the Timberline tanks. The Hidden Lake and Bloomington wells are located at the top of the system. The Cobab well and Pitzel Springs are located at a lower elevation. While the Hidden Lake tanks can supply water to the entire system, they will primarily supply water to the upper zone. The Timberline tanks supply water to the lower zone. Currently, only the Hidden Lake well is in operation. Due to water quality issues, Cobab well and Pitzel Springs have been offline since 2016 when Hidden Lake well went online. Because of bacterial contamination present in Pitzel Springs and to a lesser extent in Cobab well, the Division of Drinking Water requires that both sources are treated to be allowed back online. The main transmission line that provides water to the lower system is severely undersized, limiting fire flow capacity. Additionally, it has frozen and burst numerous times over the years due to the shallow installation depth. Maintenance and repairs are more difficult and expensive since these pipe failures occur during extreme winter conditions. So the proposed project, the filtration upgrade includes the installation of a system to filter and treat the water from Cobab Well in Pitzel Springs, number 3. The filtration system will be housed in booster pump number 2, station 2. This structure will be expanded to fit the new filtration system and will also include a new generator. The treated water can then be pumped to the timberline tanks in the lower system or to the hidden lake tanks in the upper system. The water line replacement includes the installation of about 1,200 feet of 8-inch and 10-inch PVC pipe to increase flow capacity. The pipelines will be insulated and buried at a depth of 7 feet to avoid freezing and breaks in the future. So I'll show you a couple pictures. So the map is showing that little red square is where booster pump number 2 is, station 2 is, and that's the station that's going to house the filtration system. And that gets pumped up to where booster pump 3 is, where that pipeline is, the dotted pipeline is showing. And that crosses the Powder Mountain Ski Resort parking lot, and it's going to be upgraded to the 10-inch pipe. And the smaller, the pipelines going off to the left are going to be the 8-inch PVC pipe. So this is booster pump number 2 station. And this is like where it's going to expand back, and the roof will stay like at a very steep angle, but it has the most space to be able to house the filtration system. So this is just the booster pump, but this shows like what's currently there. They're going to expand it out to the right, and this is like the insulation they use to insulate the pipes right now. And so the cost sharing. Staff recommends the board authorize 77% of the project cost up to $1,395,000, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 3.33% interest over 30 years, with annual payments of approximately $78,000, including reserves. That is staff's report.
Thank you for the report. Would the applicant like to add anything?
I'm Roy Watts, the manager. I just wanted to say he's done a great job. Thanks, Ann. We appreciate the board considering this. It's extremely helpful for us as we complete this water system renovation, and it's just such a critical part of that whole thing. And the Board of Water Resources have been so helpful as we've actually fixed this whole thing that was very old and dilapidated, and so we just appreciate your help. If any technical questions, 2 engineers can answer those questions.
Okay, board, are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, chair would be looking for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion that the board authorize 77% of the project cost up to $1,395,000, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 3.33% interest over 30 years, with annual payments of approximately $78,000, including reserves.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Board Member Steed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ani. Okay, moving on in the agenda, we are down to a special item, RL 591. These are additional funds for Hurricane City. Ken Richens.
Yes.
And then Mayor Billings online. I don't know, and I know the guy on the end, Mark Anderson. Hi, Mark. Okay, Ethan. Did we ever find out if Mayor Billings was online?
I'm not so sure.
We're here. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Hayden DeMille, our city manager as well.
Okay, Ethan, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Excuse me. Excuse me. Yeah, for Hurricane City, we, this one, when we committed last board meeting in March, those funds came from the City Water Loan Fund. As we talked about in the briefing meeting, that fund has gone away. And so these funds, these additional funds needed are coming from the Conservation and Development Fund, which carries interest with it. The total project cost is $37,800,000, and that's including everything with the pressurized irrigation and the drinking water, all those components. This was authorized in December 2023, and then, as I said, committed in March of this year. So this project is located in the southern part of Hurricane City in Washington County. When the project was initially authorized, and we kind of talked about this at the last board meeting when we committed funds, but for both systems, when it was authorized, since then there have been significant increases in material and labor costs, and there were a couple items associated with the wells that were not originally included in the estimate. And so now the applicant is requesting an additional $1,282,000 that will go directly to the drinking water portion. The amount that was committed, $12,665,000, covered the board's portion of the PI part of the project, and then a lot of the drinking water portion too. So they're requesting this additional amount to get them over the top on the drinking water part of the project. And then just to touch on some of the water efficiency associated with this one, with the expansion of the PI system, they'll be able to reduce some of the use of their drinking water system by 800 or more acre feet. They're also installing secondary meters on about 1,460 existing connections using ARPA funds that were approved by the board a couple of years ago. And with that, they're hoping to decrease secondary water use by 400 acre feet with that project. And so for this project, the drinking water portion is totals about $9,277,000. Of that amount that was committed, $6,603,000 went towards that, and then with the applicant putting in 15% at almost 1.4 million, that leaves that amount that they're requesting today, $1,282,000, and that's actually in the cost sharing there, and so that's those numbers. And so I'll do the recommendation. Staff recommends the board authorize and commit an additional $1,282,000 from the C&D fund, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 3.33% interest over 25 years with annual payments of approximately $81,000, including reserves. And that is staff's report. Thanks.
Thank you, Ethan. Does the applicant want to add?
Yes, Hurricane City really appreciates you considering adding these additional funds. One reason we weren't able to tie this total number down was because as soon as we drilled a test well, but now we're drilling the real well, and when we get the gallons per minute out of that well, then we're going to be building a booster station and a sand separating tank. And so we didn't know the capacity of either of those, so we haven't been able to bid that out until we get this well drilled. And the driller's on board and ready, and we had to do a land swap on this well, and it's going to be awarded. We were able to get our land swap from our original property to the property we ended up drilling this well on, and we're planning on awarding it tonight to Gardner Brothers Drilling out of Enterprise, and we're confident that they'll do us a good job.
Great. Thank you. Mayor, is there anything that you would like to add?
Thank you for letting us be online. We do have city council tonight, and that is one of our items on the agenda, so I didn't feel like I could run up to Salt Lake for this meeting, so I appreciate you accommodating us. We are very grateful to all the considerations that have been made to help us, especially where we're converting a lot of the perfectly good culinary water to, and make sure that we're using, I guess, our secondary in secondary. So thank you for this accommodation and help.
Thank you. Board, any questions for any of these presenters? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the board authorize and commit an additional $1,282,000 from the C&D fund, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 3.33% interest over 25 years, with annual payments of approximately $81,000, including reserves.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Councilmember Steed. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Ethan. Just informational. And just for everyone's information, we do have a new application that we just tell you about. We don't really do any presentation on it, but it'll be RE 494, Washington County Water Conservancy District, and we don't do any. Okay, that's all we'll do. There'll be more coming later. Next item on the agenda would be our Airborne Snow Observatory report. Scott McGettigan, Water Optimization Section Manager, is going to present now. Thank you, Scott, for being here.
Good afternoon, members of the board. There we go. A little new to this, sorry. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. I'm really excited to be here, and hopefully this will be an informative presentation for you. So my name's Scott McGettigan. I work for the Division of Water Resources. Manage the not interstate stream section anymore. We call it the Water Optimization Section now. Oops, I scrolled ahead too soon there. So I'm here to talk about our ASO project, and so some of you may be familiar with this concept already, but hopefully I can add a little bit more, shed a little bit more light on what we're doing here and help you understand a little better. So a little overview of what we're going to be discussing today. First, I'll just touch on the history of snow water equivalent and how it's measured, and then we'll talk about airborne snow observatories, who they are, what their background is, and what they do. And then we'll talk about our Wings Over Weber project, and then follow up with the Flags, Flights, and Forecast project, which is another one going on. So what is SWE? Well, that's snow water equivalent. And I think I'd be preaching to the choir to say that snow is obviously very important to us here in Utah, and to the water cycle, and to how our reservoirs function, how our systems distribute water to users. Snow is a key feature of everything. And Utah gets approximately 95% of its water from snowpack. And so the question again, what is SWE? Why is it important? Well, if you've lived in Utah for a long enough time, you probably kind of already intuitively know what SWE is, because when you wake up in the morning and you see your driveway full of wet snow, that's the time to tell your son to go out there and shovel it instead of you doing it. And when you see that light dusting, you're like, I got this. I get the leaf blower out, and you blow it away. So SWE is intuitive to us. We know that there's different densities when it comes to snow. And also we understand by the same fact that we all live in Utah here, is that, well, some of us from St. George may not experience this as much, but anyways, but if you get a storm in your neighborhood and you drive maybe 3 miles away, you might see that they got hardly anything at all. But the key point is that snow is highly variable, and that was highlighted by Jordan's presentation earlier. Some of those concepts will relate to what we're talking about here. So, how has it been measured historically? Well, it's been done for over 100 years. Used to be that they would take these, maybe they still do it, I think they do. They take these tubes and they stick them in the snow, and they take it out and they weigh the tube, and they had the weight before the tube was full of snow, and they can get how much water content was in that snow. And since that time, measurements evolved, and we have different methods, and we've moved to snow course sites, and now we have these snow tell sites, which are far more advanced. They have this is the sites that Jordan's team at the NRCS manages. They have climatic data associated with them. They have snow pillows, and that's not something you lay your head on, that measure the weight of the snow, and they can collect soil moisture and all sorts of fun things, and that's transmitted wirelessly. So we get a lot of good information now, but that information is really, truly only really perfect in the area immediately adjacent to or surrounding these sites. And so folks have been trying to advance snow measurement techniques for many years now, and they've been looking at using things such as ground-based radar or LiDAR, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of that here. And here's the visual representation of that last slide that I was talking about. You can see the fellas out there on the wooden skis with the leather boots. That's how my grandpa used to do it, he tells me. And then the snow tube down there at the bottom corner there, and then the more advanced snow tell site with all its fancy gadgets there that work really well, and that's the way we do things. So we're going to move on to ASO here now. We call them ASO. It's Airborne Snow Observatories, and so their origins are from they got their start in the. Move my cursor over here so I can. Oh, it's touchscreen. Awesome. So, all right. So ASO, they got their origins at the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, where Thomas Painter and his team first started researching how they could use some new techniques to measure snow more accurately and get a better sense of the distribution of snow. And when in their first attempts, they started getting 98% or better in their estimations. And so this went on for some time, that they expanded their efforts, and they became more operational. And they had, they went from Sierra Nevadas, where they had a number of drainages that they were measuring, and even did some measurements in the Swiss Alps and some places in between. And so by 2019, NASA advised them to transfer their technology to the commercial space, and they became the ASO Inc., a private company that now does this work. And they are the only ones licensed to use this technology that has been developed within the NASA's framework there. And so they have 30 entities that they currently do snowpack data and forecast modeling for, and that now includes Utah. And since they're the experts, I'm gonna let them talk about give the best perspective of what this work is. And this was a video created by the California Department of Water Resources, and hopefully there's sound, and hopefully it plays actually. Nope, it's not doing it.
Scott, is it coming off the thumb drive?
Yes.
You might need to save it to the.
Oh, that means I have to exit out of this, don't I? We can do it though. Thumb drive?
Just not through the PowerPoint.
It's loaded into the PowerPoint. It's probably linking to like some website, I think. Let me try and just download or move the, sorry, bear with me folks. Oops. And then put it on this. We can do this. All right. We'll get a little go backsies here. All right, let's see if this works. Well, I think we're gonna miss out on it. I apologize. So it would have been what?
Let's just Google it. I just Googled it. So.
You found it yourself?
Yeah.
Awesome.
I just Googled
See, that's
it.
why Maurice's here.
I heard that. Is that it?
I think so. And then there's no sound.
Well, that's on Seth and Paul and Carmen. So. Right?
Yes. But we're so close. It feels like, oh, that's why, because that's muted right there, probably.
Well, but it shouldn't go through. Why is it not unmuting?
Maybe this is the first time you've ever played a video at your board meeting, so.
I want to unmute. You tell me. Let's try that. Okay.
I think we're about successful.
If not,
technologies that we've explored is the...
We'll go to the beginning because that's halfway through. Okay. And we'll go full screen there, and we'll... Yeah, I'll turn it down so we don't blast everyone. We'll try that.
So we've been measuring snow the same way with snow tubes since the early 1900s. And a lot of the technologies have changed since then. Some of the new emerging technologies that we've explored is the Airborne Snow Observatory, where they're able to determine how much snow is on the ground by airplane.
The Airborne Snow Observatory is an aircraft that has a scanning LiDAR and an imaging spectrometer on board. And from 23,000 feet flying over, we can measure the snow depth to within about 2.5 inches from 23,000 feet. Still blows me away, and I've been doing this for over a decade now.
You think about our traditional network of snow courses and snow pillows, and those are all in individual single locations. And when you think about how big a watershed is, even if you're measuring maybe 10 sites in a large watershed, you're not covering the whole thing. And so with ASO, it can fly over and get data every 3 square meters in that watershed and tell us very precisely what's going on in the snowpack, more so than we've ever known before.
If you think of it like a television set, with the snow courses, those snow tubes, and the snow pillows, about 4 or 5 of the pixels on your TV set get turned on. Well, you can't see the whole picture. So with the Airborne Snow Observatory, what we do is turn on every pixel of the TV. So we get the complete picture, and we know how much water there is in that snowpack.
It's really important that we have an understanding in each watershed and the best understanding we can. And so that's where these technologies like ASO come in to improve that understanding. And we've got great partners up and down the state, local water agencies and federal water agencies, the United States Bureau of Reclamation, that are helping make sure we can get this technology expanded as far as we can.
Snow surveys and the forecast that comes from that allows us to be able to operate much more efficiently. So when you know how much water is coming, the users of the water can plan better. We can maximize storage and not over-release ahead of time or not under-release and have issues with flooding. So definitely critical to operations of not only Lake Tahoe, but the other reservoirs in the system.
All right, we lucked out. Thanks, Marisa. Go back to the slideshow from current slide. All right. Make sure we can progress forward here. Yes, good. All right, so that video was a perfect overview, and it's going to say things better than I will, but maybe just to kind of dive in a little bit more into what ASO's process is. So obviously the flight part they kind of covered in the video pretty well. So you need to actually have a snow-free flight before you can actually get the data you need. You need to be able to get the ground level. And then after that, the flights they do subsequent to that will be ones that measure snow at the point in time in which you want to. And they use these LiDAR and spectrometer. LiDAR is light detecting and radar. And that shoots a bunch of lasers down at the ground, and it reflects back up, and that millions of lasers, I should say, down at the ground, and then that they get the level of the ground or the snow beneath the plane. And then once they're done with that, they have to take this data and they have to process it and do some QA, QC, and make it and prepare it for actual use in their modeling. And so that's the next step. And then they take this data and they plug it into models that will help to forecast runoff and timing and things like that. And so that's the basic process that they use there. And ASO right now, the areas of operation, this is a map showing where they've been working throughout the western United States. And you can see that a lot of the work that is concentrated in the California area region, the Sierra Nevadas, and up and down that area, because obviously this is where the technology originated, and it made sense that a lot of the projects were focused in that area. But they have since expanded to a lot of watersheds in Colorado, and now we're getting into Utah, and it doesn't even have, this map's not updated enough to have our newest project on here yet. So that's what I'm going to talk about here is the Wings over Weber ASO project. And when we were first looking at the Great Salt Lake Basin and considering doing an ASO project here, we were considering the Bear, the Provo, but the Weber just seemed to make most sense for learning purposes and for it seemed like a clean project to us. It just and the size, because the bigger and bigger you get, the more expensive you start to encounter for these the cost for these kinds of projects. And so what we did is about a year ago at this time, we were working on an application for a federal grant from Reclamation to help us with this project. And we prepared that, submitted it. We had some other agencies in partnership with us, the Great Salt Lake Commissioner's Office and Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, and then obviously Water Resources, and we're 50% cost share to the Reclamation's 50% that they bring to the table. And we're covering 870 square miles of the Weber River drainage. And like I said, the main project objective is to learn about Airborne Snow Observatory and how it could benefit Utah and our water management here, and especially one in the Great Salt Lake Basin, because that's been an area of focus more recently. And we can make note that there's 6 snow-tail sites in the Weber River drainage, and I was impressed that they were pretty accurate, I guess, last year. I don't know if that's always the case, but that's something we'll have to look more closely at. And we just want to be able to improve operational decisions and to get a better picture of snowpack in the Weber River watershed. And we will be comparing this against stream gauges. All right, go forward. There we go. So here's a map of the area that we're covering. We're not covering the Ogden segment of the Weber River Basin. We have 3 key reservoirs there, the Echo, East Canyon, and Rockport. And that we think that's really important to learn about how this information can help better manage reservoirs. And here's our project timeline. As I stated earlier, we submitted our proposal in 2024, in May of 2024, and then we were notified of award, but not fully awarded at that point in time in September 2024. We hoped to get our snow-free flight in last fall, but we didn't end up getting that done. And so our snow-on flights this year will provide a retrospective of the water condition or the snow conditions for this year. We still think that's valuable, and we still look forward to getting that full information after we get our snow-free flight. But at the subsequent years that we're looking at, the spring of 2026 and 2027, will be more of a real-time picture of things. And then we have a final report due to reclamation at the end of 2027 in the fall. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the other project we have in Utah in the Colorado River Basin. This is the Uinta Headwaters, and that you can see that their name is Flakes, Flights, and Forecasts. And not to be outdone, the Division of Water Resources had to come up with a cute name too, and so we call ours Wings Over Weber. Not that it's a contest or anything, but the next person that has an ASO project, they'll have to try and compete with us. So. But this project is also funded similarly by the Snow, Water, and Supply Forecast Grant from Reclamation. And like I said, it's led by the Colorado River Authority. It is the first ASO project in Utah, and their timeline is 2024 to 2026. And here's since we don't have a lot of information on our project yet, this is a map of theirs and a flight path that they took at one point in time. We do actually have now a flight path because we've done some flights, but we don't really have data, and this was the one I had immediately on hand. But I think we can start seeing the spatial distribution in a really cool way with this data, and I don't know that we fully tapped the opportunities that you have with this information yet, but here's just the basic map that ASO Inc. will send to us when they've done a flight, and you can see how the snow is distributed and the water content of this snow more clearly. And it could be even more interesting to see this over time and how it evolves and how it's different from year to year. Another interesting piece of data that we can get from the reports that after flights are done is this elevation band distribution. And you can see in red this was, in blue was earlier in the year, and then red is later in the year, so March 25th to April 14th. And you can see how the snow has melted off at the lower elevations, and then the higher elevations are still pretty high, have quite a bit of snow content still left in them. And that could be useful in a variety of ways. And then we have this aspect plot that shows you where the snow is most located on what slopes of the mountains it's located on. So I thought those were great examples of how this could potentially be useful in additional ways. So that's all I have for today, and you don't have to make a motion, so there you go. But thank you, and any questions?
So moving forward into the future, is it a potential that we may do more of the state area, depending on how we look at the data you're collecting for the next 3 years, the next 2 years beyond this year, but where is this headed? And are we comparing to how we forecast with the snowtail sites, for instance? Are we taking comparisons and saying, okay, is it really worth it to do it this way? I understand it's incredible amount of data and it's much more accurate, but is it giving us that much more? So those are just general questions, and then anybody else that might have a question.
Yeah, I'm happy to delve into that just a little bit. I think, yeah, we're going to look closely at the value that it provides in comparison to the cost that it is, because we know that it's not cheap to send up a plane into the air, and there may be a variety of options on how to deal with it in the future. For example, you could be, we only do it every couple of years, or maybe we determine that there's a way to get something from it that doesn't require routine flights, but yeah, this is something we're going to evaluate and look at more closely to try and understand if, what's the added value and what's the worth of that value.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I could.
Board Member Merkley.
Do we have an idea on a square mile basis how much this costs?
I have not looked at it from that perspective. I can show you those maps that we we looked at, and the cost per each of those project areas are, which are both pretty similar in cost and size. So you could get a sense of that, and that is a key aspect. You know, the larger you get, the more cost it has. But there also is an additional cost for the early on, which is the snow-free flight, which won't exist in the future. So, but we could parse that out and get a sense of that. But I don't have a number. I'm not prepared to give
No,
you.
it's okay. You've got my email.
Okay.
One follow-up question. What is the ideal time frame? When have you chosen to make your flights during the snow accumulation season?
So that's a good question, Board Member Merkley. It's challenged because there's you don't want to be too late, because that's the worst possible situation you could be in, but you also want to be as close to the peak as possible. And that's the benefit of having multiple flights to choose from. So if you do one at one time, and then if you have just one, it's, you know, your chances of getting near peak are a lot harder to accomplish. But we've definitely experienced where you know, you want to schedule a flight and it's not the most ideal circumstances to do it, and because of the weather conditions or who knows what might happen, any unforeseen challenges, and then you're postponed, and that we actually had some of that, and so that there is that hazard, but it can be somewhat mitigated by having multiple flights as an option, in case you did it at a time and you're like, that wasn't quite the right time, do it another time, but then it adds more cost. So
okay, so in any given year, you may be going up 2 or 3 different times.
yeah, like that. We have 2 planned for this year and then next year, and then 3. We actually had originally planned 3 this year, but we didn't get the snow-free flight, so we didn't think it was worth to do.
Gotcha.
You know, without, because we want the closest to real time if we're going to get that 3rd flight. So
very cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
So is the objective to catch the peak then? Is that what we're after on these then, as close as possible?
We think that's likely the most valuable thing, but that's not the only thing that we could be looking at. We could be looking at changes during the the snow accumulation season. So, but usually most water management decisions are made based on the peak, so it makes sense to try to get as close to it as possible, especially if you only have 1. But if you have 2, you may try and, you know, get the front end of the peak rather than the back end, or depending on what your objectives are, it could be the back end too, I guess.
Sorry, one more question. With the Colorado River Authority, have they already gone through the process of trying to correlate their data with NRCS data, and how well did that mesh?
That's so as far as checking against NRCS, they have put together a report. I'm not sure if they completely checked with NRCS. They might have been with the Colorado River Basin Forecast Center's forecasts. I believe they've done some checks against that, and I don't recall what their accuracy was. I know there's still some tweaking that needs to be done because, as I'm sure you're aware, the further down you get into a system with the stream gauge, it's got all sorts of regulation going on that's going to impact that, and so they either have to try and back those diversions out, or they have to find a location that is less impacted by those things, and so I think there are some corrections they have to figure out there before they can really fully do the comparison, but we have to do a similar comparison for the Weber to really get a handle on the accuracy. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. That was very interesting. We'll look forward to hearing more about this in the future.
All right. I would be happy to talk more once we actually have a flight done, or once we have data, once we have our snow-free flight. So,
oh, that'll be awesome.
All right.
Okay, and now for my favorite part of the meeting, Director Yeager, please.
Yeah, thank you. Since we last met, and as you could tell from the presentation Jordan gave, the southern part of the state has had a pretty rough go as far as snow and our water supply down there. And actually on April 24th, the governor issued an emergency drought declaration through an executive order where about 17 counties, mainly in the southern part of the state, were included as part of that drought declaration. The emergency orders of the governor, after COVID, there were some laws put in place that they only last for 30 days. We had anticipated that there would be a special session this month, and it turns out there's not going to be, so that drought declaration will lapse, and then the Drought Response Committee is meeting next month to kind of reevaluate the situation, whether the governor should issue another emergency order. We know that drought declarations, the biggest bang for the buck on them is just public awareness and letting people know of the water situation and being able to require state facilities to do certain actions. It does make some money available, some loan monies through UDAF and some emergency funds through the Division of Emergency Management, but the biggest thing it does, in my opinion, is just the public awareness. So that's a really good tool for that. But, you know, we'd all prefer just better water supply too than going through that. As far as legislative items, next week is interim week. We've been asked to present at the water conditions update, and Joel Williams will actually be doing that for me because I will be on a water reuse tour, infrastructure tour in San Diego. I'll be visiting the Carlsbad desalinization plant as well as the Pure Water San Diego facility to try to get a handle on it, especially as we talked about in our briefing meeting. And the project that Washington County Water Conservancy District has ongoing for water reuse, it gives us kind of a real on-the-ground example of what that looks like. The other thing that was interesting was I'm part of the Western States Water Council, one of the governor's appointees, and last week I was able to go to a subseasonal and seasonal forecasting workshop where we really talked about how far is the science. It kind of gets to Jordan Clayton's point on we don't do a very good job once we're more than 14 days out. And so there was a lot of discussions about, well, how good do we have to be to make better decisions? And, you know, we want it better than the historical average if we're going to go to all that work to try to forecast it. But it gets very sciencey very quick as far as looking at oscillations in the South Pacific and how they move across. And so it was really good. I was able to present on Utah and our water supply situation and how S2S could improve our ability to do our work. That being said, they still have a long ways to go. So we'll look for opportunities to try to support that research. As far as the Unified Water Infrastructure Plan, there's been a pretty significant efforts this last little bit. And just a reminder, the goal of it is to create a comprehensive prioritized list of all potential water infrastructure projects for the next 20 years. Particularly, they'll be looking for state funds and have that funding prioritized. And we have gone through this process over the last month and a half where we had an open application period for people to provide us projects and kind of time them out of like this is needed in the next year or 2 years or 5 or 20. So we're collecting projects. We've had lots of questions on, well, if I don't get my project in, is there another opportunity to input projects? And the answer is yes. There will be an annual process in which we can add to our relevant agency plans. And so for your guys' awareness, probably at our, and I haven't told my team this yet, but at our June meeting, we'll have a kind of a presentation on what projects have been submitted. Our relevant agency plan has to be done by June 30th, but then we'll also probably talk about the prioritization process and get feedback from you guys on that. So a lot of work going on there, and I appreciate all the water entities that have submitted projects and called and asked questions. And it's, you know, our goal is to get the best list we can. We recognize that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and this will be something that we are developing as we go. As far as cloud seeding, we had quite the cloud seeding year. Ground generators ran for almost 17,000 hours. On average, over our historical was about 15,000, so about 2,000 more hours. The East Shore program, so kind of on the Weber side, draining into Great Salt Lake, operated for about 2,500 hours on its own. So that was pretty great. And then in the southern part of the state, we have an aircraft program with about 42 flight hours and more than 29 from the last season. So a lot of good work going on there. We're also working on an evaluation and optimization study, as well as an updated environmental study. There have been lots of environmental studies in other parts of the U.S., but never here in Utah. So we're going to initiate one of those, and that's scheduled for the 2025-2026 winter. And then for conservation, our landscape incentives and rebates, our team has taught about 7 local scape classes this spring. And we've also developed a landscape resource guide, which was pretty cool. We had a presentation yesterday on it at one of our staff meetings, and it was really great. So we'll try to send out a link to you guys so you can see that as well. And then we're also hosting monthly webinars. And this is for all those DIYers out there who want to go put waterwise landscaping in, but and also how to maintain it. A lot of times it's easy to plant plants, but like actually what do you do after that is important. So it covers all of those type of things. So that's pretty exciting. As far as water conservation plans, we have 39 plans that are due this year, and the drafts are due July 15th. And then we have a few upcoming outreach events. One is at the Jordan Valley Spring Garden Fair, which is on May 17th. And we're also at the Sandy Spring Fair, and then which is on May 31st, and the Weber Basin Water Conservancy District Garden Fair on June 7th between 8 and 2. So getting out, trying to let people know and encourage water conservation and converting our lawns from landscapes, or from mainly turf and high water use landscapes to water-wise landscape. And then as far as the state water plan, you saw today that we have a full section of 2 people who are working on that and more. We have lots of people in our planning branch who are participating in it, but they're moving full steam ahead. They've been out meeting with our watershed councils and talking about our hope and our goal for the watershed councils to participate in in the state water plan. We have a finalized outline and are working on developing specific scenarios and those type of things. So that's on the way. That has a deadline of December 31st of 2026. So a lot of work to do there. Dana? Do you want to use your mic?
I thought we were just chatting. Has everybody here filled out the survey for their area?
I don't know, unless they were at the Watershed Council, we'd be happy to share it.
So I'm part of the Watershed Council
Mhm.
in our area, and there's a survey you fill out that like what the needs are and what you have to kind of look along with it. It's more homework than it is just a guess, but I mean you have to read the outline that they have. But I thought it was good, and you get your voice heard, and I volunteered to help compile the ones we have, but I haven't heard how many that is yet, so I don't know what I've gotten myself into, but yeah, it's if you guys get the opportunity to fill them out for your watershed, you probably know as experts in your areas, it might be helpful. That's all.
Yeah. Great, thank you, Dana, and that's a great point. We'll get that added to my email that I'm going to follow up with you guys for you guys to fill out. And part of that goal, the state water plan has always been very comprehensive, but our goal is to get more of the local voice included into it. And so we're going to do these basin perspectives, and this is what Dana's referring to. So local input into what should that be, what are the challenges, the opportunities, and those type of things. And we've talked a lot about the state water plan and who's the audience, and I have been working on this issue of state water planning for quite a while, and I used to always say, well, it's for everybody, right? It's got great information in it. And then at the end of the day, as I've kind of thought through this more, is that this is really focused on, in my opinion, the legislature and the governor, like being able to provide information to them from a statewide perspective. And so our ask is that these watershed councils and other folks help us communicate what they want to the legislature and the governor to hear from them. What do they want them to know? So we think that's a real opportunity. Obviously, when we're writing it for that level, it should be digestible for everybody. So yes, it's still a plan for everybody, but my goal is that this is really a tool that the legislature and the governor can use to understand our water issues as we move forward. And our goal is still to update them every 5 years. And because when you get to a point where your plan's 10 years old, it's pretty old. So that's kind of our goal. So this will be a continual process to improve. The other big planning piece that we're working on is the Great Lake Basin Integrated Plan. We're still working with the Bureau of Reclamation to get a contract through that federal process, so we can get some of the modeling undertaken. But hopefully that is out, and we've had some people, it wasn't a full RFP process, but like a letter of interest to go into a full RFP process. So hoping to get some good folks there. And then we have lots of partner engagement continues, and then we have the 8 individual projects that are still ongoing. And then just 2 items as far as the Colorado River. I mean, I think probably a lot of you stay pretty abreast to this. Negotiations are still ongoing between the 7 basin states. There is a requirement by the Bureau to have a consensus framework developed by the end of the month. So within the next 2 weeks, or the beginning of June, the first week in June, and the Bureau will include it. The last Colorado River Authority meeting we had, it did seem, I'll say, hopeful that there might be a path forward, which is different than I've heard the last little bit. So that was good news. So we can hope that that moves forward and we can get a consensus framework on that. As far as the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Forum and Advisory Council, will be holding a lot of, actually there's a lot of meetings in Utah for this summer. We have the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Forum and Advisory Council on June 2nd through the 4th. Then we also have the Western States Water Council meeting the week after here in Utah. Then we have an Upper Colorado River Commission meeting held in Salt Lake. So it seems like a lot of these meetings that float around the different states are all here in Utah, which saves me from traveling around. So we're looking forward to all of those. And then lastly, the Bear River Commission met on Tuesday, April 15th here at DNR. So there was some good discussions with the commission. And I think that's all I have for you guys, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? That was excellent. Thank you. All right. Is there anything else we need to discuss today? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Also move.
Second. All in favor? Aye. We're adjourned.